Good evening and welcome to the Tuesday, January 21st Facilities Committee meeting. We are unfortunately starting a little late and we have a very packed agenda, so I'm going to just move right into Mark Brooks providing administrative remarks. What do I need to do first?
Sure, there were public comments, but we don't
Oh,
have
no,
any.
no, you're first and then public comment.
Okay.
Introductions and administrative
So
remarks.
the only administrative remark I have is we received a engineer from Gilmore Associates notification that they're making some traffic signals improvements to Glen Mary and King of Prussia Road, specific to Glen Mary Road pedestrian improvements. Once we have the actual documents, we'll pass it along to the board for your reference.
So when you say Glen Mary improvements, I mean, that sounds good. Is that specifically related to our high school students who walk down Glen Mary towards King of Prussia or elementary school students?
The letter indicates the proposed improvements include improving the pedestrian access at the intersection and upgrade curb ramps, crosswalks, and a rectangular rapid flashing beacon with push buttons for pedestrians to cross King of Prussia Road at Glen Mary. The signal is just outside Radnor Elementary School.
Okay, so
That's wonderful.
It's elementary.
It is at the elementary school. Yeah, okay, that's great. Thank you to whomever from the public called the township to complain. I'm going to assume we have no public comment because we have nobody here. Patty, you don't have any emails? Okay. So the next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from our December 10th meeting. Does anybody have any concerns with the minutes as printed or posted? Did you have any? No. Okay. So I'm going to say the minutes from last month's agenda are approved. And so we move on to item 4, which is the approval of the Radnor Township School District Transportation Repair and Renovation Project bid. And I appreciate that in the header you noted that this project is to be paid for by the insurance company. This relates to the fire that we had last year in the transportation center.
Correct. If you guys did not receive this in your bid package, but we worked through the details on this. We had 4 prime contractors, one of which is a general contractor. Of that, we ended up getting 6 general contractors to bid on the project. I have highlighted in green on the screen and in your packet the apparent low bidder. We have chosen not to take the second shift alternative. Originally, we looked at that to see whether or not we could try to minimize the impact of the transportation department, but after speaking with John Hearn, he indicated to me that he would prefer it to be during the daylight hours. There's certain advantages to us in addition to saving the insurance company some money. So we have Walter Brucker Company for general contractor, mechanical contractor CHM, electrical contractor MJF, and for plumbing contractor Guy Cooper. I might add that originally the estimates were, to give you an idea, the original estimates that were done by the service had the general contract at $875,000. This came in at $292,585. The mechanical contractor was originally bid out or estimated at $210,000. It came in at $83,280. The electrical contract was only estimated $180,000. It came in at $201,104, and we had, I think, 10 contractors bid on that. So that was interesting that was a little bit higher. And as for plumbing contractors, they originally estimated the work at $95,000. It came in at $39,950. So again, the insurance company will pay for these contracts, and if the board approves these next week, then we'll proceed signing contracts with the individual contractors and get the bus garage moving along. Let me add that in the bus garage, this is more than just slapping paint on the wall after a fire. That in fact we're making the upgrades because our insurance policy calls for that, as well as the township, for ADA. So there's an ADA ramp out front, which there currently is not. ADA doors entering the building, as well as ADA conference room, ADA bathrooms. So that building was originally built in the 70s and had some work done in the 80s. Not much has been done since then. So we will have a much more updated building. It has been a long time coming. But I think at the end result, by the time we get everything done by the summer, that everybody should be very pleased with the outcome of that building. That's my hope.
Well, that's great, and I'm really happy to see all those bids coming in so far below the estimates other than the electrical. And I hope that bodes well for other projects at the district. How about I expect it to bode well
Okay.
for other projects in the district to the extent any of these people are bidding. Did any of my colleagues have questions about this, the bidding process, the actual outcome?
No.
Liz? Ally, you're all set? Okay. Ready?
You're happy with all of these contractors? You
am.
know many of them or
I
know
have-
of them or whatever?
I have dealt with two of the three. The third one I have heard very good things about. The fourth one I don't know a lot about, but one of the things on the agenda tonight is also for a construction manager, and part of their responsibility, again, that's paid for by the insurance companies, to sit on top of them and make sure that they're doing exactly what they're supposed to do, even though there's a delta of $15,000-$16,000 between what they had bid and what the next lowest bidder was. Want to make sure they're not trying to. We'll make sure we're getting what we need to out of them. How's that sound?
We don't get a bunch of change orders later
Yes.
on.
Were you happy with the quality of the responses?
Yes, actually, was very significantly. Plumbing, we were a little disappointed in 2, but that's not uncommon. Electrical, we were thrilled to death that we got 10. General contractor, we were thrilled to death to get 6. A lot of districts out there are going through still the traditional method where you send packages out. We went through something called PennDot, which is an all-electronic system. And we were able to get contractors that may not normally bid on school work, bid on this particular project. So that helps to get that price even better.
And you're comfortable that we only had 2 plumbing responses?
Correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item on the agenda, so everybody's comfortable with moving that forward to the full board, it sounds like. The next item on the agenda is for 2, approval to contract with the ELA Group of Lititz, Pennsylvania for the completion and submission of a preliminary plan for PennDOT approval of an access road on the high school campus with a fee not to exceed $10,000. So just as a reminder, and I'm sure you can give more detail, this is related to the infrastructure project at the high school, and when we voted on that as a full board, we separated out the portion of that project that would have been the access road. The idea being there's a concern about whether we could get the approvals, and rather than pay for architect drawings, et cetera, we want to kind of do a preliminary question and answer with PennDOT. I got some questions before the meeting from some of my colleagues about this. Do you guys want to ask them? You want me to summarize? I think the primary question was, is there a cheaper way to do it than $10,000? Is there another way to kind of ask these questions without having to enter into a contract with ELA that would give us comfort that money we spend on drawings is worth it, or that just tells us we don't have to do anything more? PennDOT's never going to approve this.
It's not just having a conversation with PennDOT. PennDOT requires.
Tell us more
Sorry.
about it, I guess.
Yeah,
Let me say that.
PennDOT requires us to have drawings, certain elevations in place, other calculations involved. So it's not just, if it was simply me going over to PennDOT going, hey guys, how you doing? Here's what we're looking to do. Let me draw it on the back of a napkin. What do you think? I would have done that already. It wouldn't cost you anything, right? They don't work like that anymore. Maybe years ago they did. But unfortunately, they have a strict process that you have to go through, and certain minimum requirements, much like a township, many townships have for a zoning hearing. You have minimum requirements of plans that you have to bring in. You have to have certified stamps on engineering plans, so on and so forth. PennDOT has the same type of thing, and I am not qualified as an engineer to be able to put a stamp on those things. So by utilizing a company like ELA, they do have that capability. One of the other advantages, the thought process with ELA is that they're already familiar with the project, as they were involved in the original feasibility study from the Schrader Group, and they've continued on with the Breslin Group. So there's several things that they don't have to reinvent the wheel on, so we thought that this would be a more cost-effective approach than going out and starting to bid that from zero.
And I would say the conversations that we had with them in both November and December, because there were conversations about what about pulling this out, and there were some earlier discussions of some higher costs, and I really want to thank Mr. Brooks. Mark went back and forth with both Breslin and ELA, and this was the bare bones. This is the minimum that we felt like we could try to get at least that basic answer. My hope is that we can hopefully get that basic answer with this, because there was initial discussions of more dollars being needed, and we went back and forth and said, really, we just want to find this out, and then we came down to the, he was able to get them down to the 10,000. So I think it is the right amount of money, and has gone through a good process to get us to that dollar amount. Would you agree?
Yes.
And I apologize to ELA. I understand that there's work involved, and I don't mean to minimize the work that they're doing. Is it primarily drawings and calculations? Is there any kind of traffic study they have to do at this point, or is all that further down the line?
That's further down the road. If
Okay.
we want to pursue that, if PennDOT comes back, they're going to take existing traffic studies to do the preliminary investigation with them, instead of having to, I won't say reinvent the wheel, but to go ahead and start a whole new traffic study that we would just waste money on.
Okay.
So they'll use existing ones and try and pitch it that way.
Okay, and it may be that PennDOT comes back and says, we need a more recent
And they
one
may.
down the road,
Yes.
but
Yes,
at least initially, we can start here.
Right, that's why I want to
Okay.
be careful, like, let's manage our expectations.
Right,
We
yeah.
pushed for the minimal, and there were discussions at the time of needing to spend closer to 30,000, if I recall.
Yep.
And that was a couple of months ago, in order just to find out, and we said, no, we just want to find out that initial piece. So we're hoping that this 10,000 will give us that initial, and then we're going to have to then figure out, what does that mean? Because that's not the final green light, it's, do we want to take this further or not?
So the question there would be subsequent questions. We don't necessarily have to go either from if we pass at this level, a very preliminary review at 10,000, we don't necessarily have to greenlight Breslin to do full drawings. It may be that PennDOT says, but, your traffic study was iffy, so we might invest in that, or there might be another drawing they want to see. So this isn't necessarily a quantum leap to the full-blown
Correct.
project. There will be other options for people to ask questions.
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely.
Questions? Okay. Does that answer you? Okay. Lydia? Okay, so I know there were some concerns about this. Do people generally approve with going back to the full board and asking for their approval to spend $10,000 on this piece? I know you had some concerns.
I recognize I'm in the minority on this. No, I don't support this piece of the project, but if this is information that other people need to decide,
Okay. You're okay with it? Okay. Sure.
In regard to placement of the maintenance, has this been identified pretty much as the best option that we have? Like, have other sites been considered? And I may be asking a question
No,
that's
no.
already been answered.
No,
but-
let me say that that is a question.
Hear how Mr. Brooks answers,
So having been here in February will be 1 year, the life has seemed to have evolved around the maintenance area and where we're going to put it, type of thing. So there are other options that we have, perhaps throughout the district, that we may look at in the future. There were really no other real options on the campus itself. We saw this as the most logical option on the campus, ruled out some of the other ones. Is this the only location in the district? No. There are other locations that we perhaps can take a look at if this is not something that we want to move forward with at some point in the future.
And there is the option to leave it where it
And I
is.
was just going to say, there's no immediate need at this point. We are fortunate we did a preliminary study of the high school as to capacity. They currently have 8 classrooms that they can rotate in and out, so they're not up against the wall as we may be up against the wall in some of the elementary schools. So we do have some flexibility there. We saw this as a long-term option that it might then benefit the school moving forward as the population is projected to increase at the elementary school level. By the time they get to the high school, there would be no new renovations needed for the high school because we've already taken steps to accommodate or anticipate those additional classroom needs.
And the maintenance building it developed over the maintenance where they're located developed both as we look to try to increase handicap parking, and also we looked at the flow at that area of the building. I think, Mark, you answered it well. I think we looked pretty carefully at the high school campus and really felt this was the best location if it was going to be on the high school campus. I think we could take more time. We've done a lot of hypotheticals on other locations within the district, but we'd need to take more time to look at other, I think to spend the time that we spent on the high school to look at other locations as well, to rule them in or out.
Can I just, but
Absolutely.
the access road is about more than just the
Correct.
maintenance, it's also about additional parking,
Correct.
correct? Right, okay. I just-
So just to follow up with that, if we decided to do the access road, we don't necessarily have to do the maintenance area, because there's other services that would be provided by that access road. The maintenance area just happened to be, oh, well, since we're here, we might as well put it there, type of thing, and seem a logical location and it would work out logistically.
Yeah, I mean, originally, that access road was developed as a way to get ADA accessible parking closer to the visitors' bleachers,
Correct.
since their accessible ramp is on that far corner
Correct.
towards Enki.
Correct.
Okay, great. So we will push that forward as well to the school board meeting, the full board meeting next week. Item 4.3 is the approval of the solicitor review contract with Breslin Architects. As far as I know, we don't have a draft of that.
We
yet.
don't.
It's still being negotiated.
We're down to 57 points that the lawyer and the architect are working through. And it's much like a tennis or ping pong thing, back and forth. So.
We're gonna start a club at the high school.
Oh, yeah, great, thanks. Don't include me in on that, okay? Thanks. So, obviously, the solicitor is looking out for the best interest of the district moving forward. Clearly, the district needs to make sure that whatever contract we enter into have protections for us. There are certain aspects of dealing with an architect who is also an agent, that they have certain rights that we want to make sure that we still respect those, but still also protect the rights of the school district moving forward. There are some details as to what constitutes an extra service, and we're working through some of those details now, what's included in the basic package, and then what would be an add-on later on. So, for example, typically the architect would look at this and say, and I'll use a former school district that I used to work at prior to coming to Radnor, that they had a project that was done. There was some litigation on that project that has now gone for past a year. The architect's position is, well, I'll go ahead and cover it up to a certain point, but if this litigation goes on for 5 years, I should be compensated for this type of thing. I see both sides of the sides of the coin. We need the architect to defend the position. We need the architect to move forward with any type of litigation. But again, not to say we're going into that, but that's a possibility. I think that's where we're walking that fine line of making sure that everybody's protected moving forward.
Okay.
But as soon, we anticipate, I have a call tomorrow with our attorneys. Steve from Breslin and myself have spent multiple hours Friday afternoon, Friday evening, Monday, and then today, going through several of the issues. Justin O'Donohue from our solicitor's office and Mike are coordinating their efforts. A draft has been sent back to them. Many of the things that the attorney had asked for, they greenlit, and Breslin said, we can live with that. We've seen that in other contracts, we can live with that. There are a few other things that we just need to define more, and making sure that the shells are where they need to be and the, mays are where they need to be.
And it's not uncommon that this takes place,
Yep.
and the architects work with what is an organizational structure
Correct.
of a boilerplate of how they want to, from their national organization, and then obviously our attorneys come from a perspective of looking out for the best interest. So this is normal, but we're Mark is and I thank Mark and I thank Steve and our solicitor for all working hard to do. We'd like to hit the mark for next week as best
Yes.
as possible, as we're trying to do. So.
My goal is to have this to you for your Friday package, so you have an opportunity to read it over the weekend.
Okay. I'm comfortable if we get it Friday, pushing it to the full board. I'm not really comfortable if we don't have it by Friday. I don't want it to be something, I said this to Mark before the meeting, I don't want it to be something that comes in on Monday. Given the scope of this project and the impact on our community, I would like the board to have that time to review. Do other people have concerns with that approach?
Well, I think it is a little unusual to put something through to the full board of this nature that we haven't seen. So no, I guess I wonder if we couldn't table it till next month so that this committee can look at it. I don't know, how do you feel?
Well, I've seen an initial draft of it. I understood a number of the points that they were negotiating, and I didn't take a lot of time to go through it in detail because I knew there were going to be so many details for negotiation. My concern with putting it off any longer is that, you know, it's another month we lose in terms of bidding, it's another month we lose in terms of potential interest rate changes, and all of these are things that the board was putting into their calculations for what we could spend. You know, my suggestion would be that we can put it before the board next week, and if the full board would prefer that it go through committee review, they can direct us to review it next month. And they
Next
can
week.
refuse to consider it. Well, no, I mean, we put it before the board on, if it comes in by Friday, we can
it
put it
comes in by
before the
Friday.
board. Yeah, we can put it before the board next week, and if the full board is not comfortable with reviewing it without full committee review, then they can direct the facilities committee to go back and look at it.
Absolutely.
Does that work?
That works with me.
Okay. Will that make you
Yeah,
comfortable? And
well,
you
so
can
if we
feel
get it
free to
by
make.
Friday.
Yeah, and you can feel free to make that motion in the meeting next month if you're concerned about it.
And,
No, I mean,
You're
I'm
the
not.
lawyer.
yeah, and I
lawyer, sir.
will say sometimes in some
No,
districts.
but it's not only lawyer, I mean, I may understand different parts of it, but I don't want to assume that other people on the board aren't going to read it because they're not lawyers. That's not fair.
And in some districts, you know, when we made that vote that we made in December, there'll be a line that says, you know, pending solicitor and administrative approval.
Right.
And it doesn't even come back to the full board.
Well, that was
So
what I was
we-
thinking.
We are taking an additional step, and that's just part of our practice, really. But it would not have been uncommon for a school board or a school district to have voted on December and said just pending solicitor and administrative review, and it would have just moved forward. So,
So you're saying we would have even skipped the approval of the contract
Right.
because we would have kind of
we could have, in
pre-approved it.
essence, I mean, there are places that will do write language
we
like
don't do
that.
that.
No, right, exactly, but they will do, that's not uncommon, that someone will say pending, you know, pending solicitor, but, I think the better practice is what we're doing. I'm trying to give you, just rest assured that I think if we have it Friday, I agree with you, I think that's a good suggestion. If we have it Friday, I think we have enough time. Certainly, it's open for discussion though Tuesday, and if, you know, if it needs to be February, it can be February. You know, we had initially at one time had set the timeline that was really, would have put us at February
I know.
anyways. So, but let's see where we are with what information we have Friday, and we can then go from the discussion there.
I just want to make sure there's an incentive for everybody to go ahead and negotiate in good faith to get this done.
Yeah, no, I agree, but I just, especially given we have so many new board members, I don't want to assume anybody's gonna, and I don't want to assume that I'm gonna have time to read it Monday night if it came in Monday after work.
Yeah, that's fair.
Okay. So that's tentatively moved to the board agenda. Item 4.4 is approval for the replacement of the red rubberized play surface at Radnor Elementary School playground. For people who know RES, it's the red top. It's the squishy red top. The Co-Star's price in the amount of $84,117 from River Valley Recreation, which is located in Wrightsville, Pennsylvania. Mark, will you give us a little background on this? Because this is not what's budgeted.
Sure. So when I got here, you had, I think, $15,000 budgeted to do some repairs to the existing red top area. Apparently, as I found out, you've done several repairs over the years. That original red top was original to the school, so you're going back 20 some odd years. That rubber shrinks, and that's what you're seeing, and it's pulling away from the sides, which is causing a tripping hazard. Somebody could get injured on it. They made attempts to go ahead and fill that in at one point, and at another point, they made an attempt to fill in the other area that was, retracting back. We could continue to do that, or we can go ahead and rip it up and do it right the first time, and over the life cycle, you'll end up saving money. We also, the question was asked, well, why don't we just take that red top out and put in wood chips? One is we'd have to dig down the blacktop, because underneath that red top is a black-topped area. So it's approximately 4.5, 5 inches deep, and there's blacktop at the bottom. We would need at least 6 inches of wood chips. And then every year, we'd have to go ahead and replace those wood chips. And as we found in the Wayne Elementary playground that you all approved last year, we had River Valley was the company that the PTO bought the equipment through, and they came out and said, oh, well, you need to have all this, all these wood chips replaced. We have to get down to real dirt. That was a significant amount of wood chips that we pulled out of there, because in the past, we've never done anything except put wood chips in. Eventually, the wood chips break down into, soil, and it wasn't very stable soil, so we had to get down to stable soil. So we removed that, and instead of filling up landfills with dumpster loads or triaxle loads, we took those wood chips and that soil and then redistributed through that pathway system that they have. If you're familiar with Wayne, they have a wooded area with a nature path. So we utilize that to stabilize and to help build up that path, because we had some gullies in there and some areas that were prone to flooding. So we saw that as a good reuse of that, a good recycled reuse of that. We'll need to do that any other facility moving forward. I need to get in there and have the stuff dug out so that we can go ahead and put in a fresh base and start from that, because we haven't done that in the past. So that's the reason why we're not going with the wood chips. Long-term, this is a cheaper way of going about it, and it's going to be something that should give you at least a 12-year life cycle, if not more, because the process for that rubberized material and the chemicals that they use are all natural now. Some of the stuff wasn't years ago, but it's less prone to shrinkage as it has been in the past. So we would anticipate not having this problem for at least the next 12, maybe 15 years, hopefully.
So, and Mark, when we spoke about this in our planning meeting, you actually said there's a warranty that's gonna
Correct.
come with this?
Yes, between about 10 years.
About 10 years, okay.
And we had a long conversation too about, just in the last couple of weeks, about wood chips and how much wood can a woodchuck chuck if a wood chip could, but anyways, that's another.
Mr. Geico over here.
Yeah, but it was interesting. We did the back of a napkin calculation of how often are we replacing wood chips over, a 10 to 15 year period. And actually the rubberized surface is probably a more economical and better way to go. Based on the lifespan and based on really accessibility issues.
Sure.
So there's not a huge savings over was it a 10 to 15 year period we looked? What was it roughly? There's not this enormous saving that I thought there would be with wood chips versus the rubber top. So that's something to talk about in the future as we move forward.
Just because you've now kind of begged the question, is the rubberized top we're removing recyclable?
Yes, we go through a process to be recycled, that's correct, yes. The other thing I would point out to you is that the rubberized surface will give you a consistently safe plain surface over its life, whereas the wood chips, you'll find areas where there's gullies, and unless somebody goes out there to maintain it, to push those wood chips back in there, you can have areas that are not as deep as they should be moving forward. With the rubberized surfaces, not only do you have the ADA benefit, but you also have the benefit of knowing that surface is safe from basically the time you put that in to the time when it starts to shrink, hopefully a long time after I'm dead, so type of thing.
May you live a long, long life.
Live long and prosper, thank you, yes.
Ally and Liz, do you have any questions?
But just as background,
Sure.
how much were we spending per year on maintenance on the red top?
On the red top, they had budgeted $15,000. I think over the past 7 or 8 years, you probably have spent about $30,000, $32,000 from what I can gather.
Did you find the money in the budget for this?
Yes, so what we did is not only do we have the money budgeted for this, but at Wayne Elementary, for example, there was $65,000 budgeted to rewire the building for Category 6 lines for the network, and that would have been contracted out. We decided to do that in-house. So in-house labor is doing that on days off, and then the only thing we're capitalizing at this point are the actual wire, and then a couple of the cabinets that Byron needs for that. So that we figure between the two, and then there's one other area we're going to be able to pull from that we should be able to cover for this. So we're not asking for any additional expenditure. We're just going to be moving around what we currently have to satisfy this.
Oh, beautiful. Okay.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Nancy, you had a question?
And just to clarify, the red top at Radnor Elementary, it's the surface underneath the play gym area as well as that round play area that's
No,
open?
it's just the round play area that's opened. The playground, the play equipment, the stuff underneath the material underneath the play equipment is actually wood chips. And that's where we can have that blown in every year. Some school districts have it delivered and then the in-house forces put it in. You have a labor cost associated with that, a manpower issue, making sure you have enough people to do the work. And then moreover, you may not have consistency depending upon how they do it. By blowing it in, essentially it's a big tractor trailer and they just blow it in, make sure it's level going across. There are certain areas that they measure to make sure there's consistent depth throughout. So it's a little bit more efficient way of going about it.
And so, given that, are there alternative surfaces that aren't as costly? that are still providing a safe area for the children to play?
For the most part, you do have the rubberized surfaces that you see, and there's different products out there. This one here is one that gives you a good lifespan. It's not as robust as some of them are out there, so it's a little bit cheaper. But certainly that and the wood chips are your basic way of going about it. Some folks were using, at one point, cut-up rubber tires. They were also using cut-up foam in those things, which are proven not to work under UV lights. And then the UV rays from the sun will break down the foam. Additionally, with the cut-up tires, there's some concern about carcinogens in those particular products and whether or not there might be a cancer causing element to that, which has been unproven, but speculation.
But the red open play area,
Yes.
I understand, and it's been a while since my kids were in elementary school, but Wayne or Ithan, do they have more of a blacktop play surface?
Wayne has the playground, which has the wood chips, the large one, and they also have smaller ones.
But that's only under the
Play equipment.
play equipment.
Yes.
But this is the open play area
Correct.
where they can play ball and everything.
And there is some blacktop around that. The other two schools have a lot of blacktop.
Right.
It's the newest elementary school.
where I'm going
I
with
do see
this?
where you're going.
Yeah,
She
she's
asked
asking
a
why
question,
we aren't
and
going
then
back
she
to
questioned,
blacktop.
Could we
Yeah.
just go back to blacktop there?
Yeah. Just, I mean,
The only reason the one thing I know is it's not an argument for it necessarily, that the red rubberized top is where they do outdoor recess in the
Right.
winter time, because then they don't have to clear the ice or anything off the blacktop. So the students can still, as long, temperature permitting, they do still send them outside for the rubberized top, because there isn't really space for them to run around inside. The gym's not sufficient. And now that we've built out every pod in the building, well, you knew I'd come up with that. There's not any group space for them to gather. There's just not an indoor space, and because lunch and recess overlap, there's just not another place to put them. So that's the one argument I know I could make for why that space is needed. I'm not sure you couldn't say that's needed someplace like Ithan or Wayne. Are you arguing for adding rubberized tops places or moving back to blacktop, or just asking?
I'm kind of just asking because I look at the number and it's kind of a large number, and I'm glad that you found the money. But, it's just, I like the red rubberized top, but it is, I don't know, it's expensive.
If we were to blacktop that, where you put down a base and then you put down the top coat on top of that, you're probably looking about $35,000 to blacktop that. And that's without color in it. That's just, a road, it's called a rice mix, so it's a much smaller, a road mix is a bigger stone. A rice mix would be a much smaller stone, probably similar to, not quite as thin as a tennis court, but something a little bit thinner, a little bit smaller, so that, you don't have kids who are gonna scrape their legs or their knees quite as much as they might on the road, which is a little bit more coarser type of stone, if that makes sense.
So basically to make it like the blacktop that's at Radnor
Correct.
already.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, and I ask these questions purely
Huh?
because I was aware that the other schools don't have it, and I know my kids play on blacktop all the time. So I'm just wondering, do we know the added benefit that this is offering? Like, have we learned from?
Injuries, whether or not we have a series of injuries in the other ones and we can do a comparison of that, I don't have that information. But I will say that if you look at the majority of the new schools being built today, they are going more towards the rubberized material because it's maintenance-free than they are the wood chips. And certainly, any type of area that you can get the kids off of a blacktop area, people see that as a benefit.
Yeah. Okay.
What is the downside of us taking another month just to look at?
No downside.
Is there a downside? Just the curiosity. You've piqued my curiosity for the original plan behind that surface in that area, and it gets back to our question, as we were talking about a week or two ago, just about the I'm very attuned, and I think the administration is, the equity among our buildings, especially with elementary buildings, making sure that we are doing things in the same fashion for all three buildings. So I think that might be something
We can investigate.
worth taking a little bit more time to investigate and look at.
good point.
When you do that, will you also explain to us what the maintenance, you said there's less maintenance costs involved in the rubberized top, so what the maintenance costs are associated with blacktop?
Well, the blacktop.
Or you're saying less than wood chips?
Less than the
not
wood chips, right?
Okay.
The blacktop, the only maintenance issue you have is whether or not at some point that cracks, you have to replace it.
Okay, and painting maybe?
And painting, yeah, depending upon how you go about doing it, because sometimes you get colored blacktop, but again, that fades off over time, wear and tear. Little feet run across and stuff like that.
Okay.
But we certainly can look into that.
Okay. So it sounds like we're gonna table that one till next month. Is that okay with folks, or would you rather? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was actually going to muddy the waters even further and ask what, while we're doing this, should we look at replacing the wood chips under the play equipment if they're going to come in and replace the surface potentially anyway? But
Sure.
I was wondering about that as well, but I'm assuming that's prohibitively expensive, or?
You mean with the rubberized material?
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be quite costly. Now, I haven't got an estimate on that. I'm working towards that for your capital budget.
Okay.
But this was more of an immediate life, health, safety need. The other is we can go ahead and continue to blow wood chips in there for the foreseeable future and still make it safe for the children. But this was something that had a little bit more expediency to it that I wanted to make sure we addressed.
So this quote will still be good in February,
Correct.
and the timing for actually doing the work was supposed to be over the summer anyway, so we're not jeopardizing.
And we were trying to coordinate that between any potential camps that would be on that property.
Okay. Great. So the last item for approval is the approval to engage Fidevia Construction Management to manage the bus garage insurance project. And again, like the contractors, this fee would be paid by the insurance company. You
Correct.
mentioned this a little before, but if you want to give us a
Yeah.
better description.
So Fidevia is the firm that we hired, and again, the insurance companies reimburse us for their expenditures to get us to this point, to get the bid documents out. They had contracted with an electrical contractor, site contractor, as well as a site engineer, electrical engineer, a mechanical engineer, as well as an architect to go ahead and get us to the point where we had the plans to go out. They coordinated the bids going out and then receiving back the bids, and looking to have them continue on the project to the end. Again, the insurance company would pick this up. Insurance company has this document, they reviewed it. They obviously would like to see me do it by myself, but obviously this is something that certainly isn't our scope to be able to require them to pay to have somebody oversee the project. And candidly, even if I were to handle it myself, I couldn't, because there's going to be some RFIs and some other information that comes in that the architect and the engineers are going to have to be involved to respond to anyway, which if we didn't have this service moving forward, we wouldn't be able to respond to. So.
Okay.
all right, so I think I missed it, but how much is the amount of this contract?
It's $18,790 per month.
Fixed fee, right?
It's under B, so
All
under
right,
terms and conditions.
per
it'll be
month, for
Until 2 months,
and a
additional
half
2 months for fully completion,
for 5.5 months?
close out of the project, which we anticipate to be August. So here, let me do the math on that.
So we're talking like 150,000?
Correct.
Okay. Okay,
Yes.
thank
approximately
you.
that.
As a district, when we go through projects, even a project like this, which, I mean, depending your perspective, you could argue is not a very large project, but there are a lot of details and pieces. Having a construction management firm, and we've done the history of, as a district when we've done that, and we've done that often, it really is, it behooves us. It protects us. It provides us to have that group that is going to be making sure they're on top of all the details, and it does give us protections as well.
In a lot of school districts in the past have used individuals to be a clerk of the works. That's the way things had been in the past. Today, with so much technology, so much litigation on these things, it's always good to have a group out there that, one, can be insured. Two, this group is run by an attorney, so he's very closely, he closely monitors the contracts. I have been involved in projects, or seen projects that they've been involved in before, and they're very good about not making sure it doesn't get to the level that there's a lawsuit. They work things out in advance to everybody's hopefully well liking. So there's a lot to be said for that to keep the project moving along, because we want to get this done so that by September, when the bus drivers come back, or August, end of August, by the time the bus drivers come back, they have a new facility, and we're not inconveniencing anybody anymore down there.
Any questions? I can understand why the insurance company wants you to do this yourself. I think that given the infrastructure project and specifically the broader district goal that we have of putting a capital plan in place, I think it's a lot to ask you to manage this, the RFI issue aside. And I would hope that when they're calculating our costs for future years, the insurance company recognizes that, you know, we've more than saved them that $150,000 just in the general contract number being so much below what the estimate was. So I hope that they're reasonable and not raising our premiums unnecessarily. Okay, so nobody has any concerns with pushing that forward? Okay. That was it for the main agenda. Does anybody have any new business to raise? Allie, are you hearing anything at the high school about the infrastructure project?
No, I have not. It has not been communicated to the students, to my knowledge, or at least not publicly.
Well, probably because we haven't done anything official, but.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, we've had, there has been opportunities at the high school with the individuals, some of the individual athletic teams for the parts that will impact them. I know Mr. Brooks met with some of those athletes as a group.
Yes. So I've met with the swimmers as a group of athletes. The other night I was meeting with the baseball boosters. While they're not directly involved in the infrastructure project, there are certain projects that we'll be working on in the next 2 years to help upgrade some of those fields, making sure that they're much more playable. We have a contract out now for lawn care, which previously that contract was 5 years and has elapsed as of the end of this month. And so we're looking to have those proposals in at some point for the board then to approve moving forward, starting in either February or March, for the contractor to come in and mow the lawn and maintain the fields. We've tightened that specification a little bit. The other thing too is that, you know, there is a watchful eye over how that's supposed to be done. That's part of my bailiwick, and there's been several conversations with the current contractor, and he has stepped it up significantly in the past year. But again, pointing out the fact that, we're entitled to this, and why aren't we getting it? And just keeping a watchful eye to make sure it's being taken care of.
You should feel free. You don't have to tell them which buildings I walk, but that I walk a number of those properties. And Mark will tell you, he gets texts from me on like a Sunday afternoon or a Friday evening saying, I'm walking here. Check out this picture. Does this look like this is properly mowed? So you can warn them that they should plan to meet their obligations.
Yes, Sarah.
I think also it goes to a much bigger issue too with the district, is that really we've had nobody in-house from the maintenance department that has any background or expertise in this. So there are a few folks who were taking the time to train, and my hope is that we will never be in the position that we are in when I walked in the door moving forward.
Great.
If you want, for student council, if you want to have, actually Mr. Brooks or myself or Mrs. Kevgis, or we could, meet with you individually to give you some more details of the plan so you can report back, or if you wanted to have someone come to a, student council meeting to share some of the details, we'd be happy, so we can talk offline about that, or you can talk with Mrs. Kevgis or reach out to Mr. Brooks about that.
Okay, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I'm on the student newspaper, so maybe we could incorporate it to tell more students about it through that.
That's great. Thank you.
And just to follow up with that, once the architect works out the legal agreement, part of the deal with him is for him to come in and talk to the groups in the high school, spend time in focus groups to talk to the students, talk to the stakeholders, talk to the coaches, talk to the staff. Here's what we're looking to do. What do you think? What are your ideas? Give me some direction on this. So while right now we're kind of in a holding pattern, waiting for us to be able to start the next phase, but once that next phase starts, I think you'll see a lot more opportunity for input, a lot more opportunities for communications as to what exactly is going on, because this process will likely move fairly fast once we get things rolling along.
And Chris Henkel, the student, has been on the steering committee, so there's
Oh,
another
okay.
student who's, so that might be a good person to reach out to as
I
well.
had no idea.
Yeah, he's for the last year plus, I guess, he
Yeah.
was on the steering committee as a student representative.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just add something to that? If part of that is the architect going to see the, speak to the various student groups to make sure we go beyond just athletics, since it is a wellness
absolutely.
facility, that it's the student body at large, because
Absolutely.
everyone will benefit from it.
Absolutely, yeah. So it's now, and I misspoke about just the athletes, it was certainly the student body as a whole, the band, every group out there, every stakeholder out there to come in to have those conversations. And, you know, there's students in our high school, even though we have a very high percentage of students that participate in an extracurricular activity, there's still a percentage of students that do not participate in something. We like to hear from them as well. And previously, last year, when I first got here, Mr. Bechtel had set up focus groups for me to meet with some of the students. And I guess there was, probably I met with them 4 different times, and it was a broad range of folks from that had nothing to do with any activity to people who were in the band, people who were in the chorus, people who were in sports, people who were in club sports that really don't have the same access perhaps on campus as some of the other teams do. So it was a good conversation to have and talk to the students, because to be quite honest with you, it's amazing what the kids come up with, no offense. You guys have some great ideas. I mean, we sit here and think we know it all. We don't. So we certainly.
We don't use the buildings every day.
Exactly right.
Ellie knows that.
Yeah. Okay.
Great. I'm going to assume there is still no public comments, and there's no one here, and nothing in the email. Okay, great. Anybody have any problems with adjourning? I'm going to take that as no. Great. We'll move on. Our next meeting, I believe, will be the 3rd Tuesday of February. I apologize, I don't have that sheet out.
That's
So,
good.
Great.